Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about economics and politics. And again, we've been talking about all the major institutions of society. We started talking about education, then we got into religion. Now we're into economics and politics, and we'll work our way to media. Albeit these are not the only institutions in society, but these are the biggest ones recognized by the functionalist theory. So whenever you're studying introduction to sociology, you tend to break into the major institutions of society to finish out the class and then finish it out again with social change. But the idea of economics and politics, as with education and religion, is this idea that these are institutions. And again, it's that word that's going to keep coming up that structure our lives. So, again, what does it mean that something is an institution? It means that we made it and then we have been socializing that institution from generation to generation. Okay, we built an institution and then we maintain it or we update it or we change them over time, but it is us who is making the institution. And again, these institutions structure our lives, structure our social behavior, and that they both block us and enable us. Again, with the education system, it enables us, it teaches us, we learn, but it also blocks us because if you don't have that degree, if you don't have that certification, you might not be able to access certain social positions in society. Same thing with religion. Religion has been a major structure of human civilization going back thousands and thousands of years. Albeit in the United States, you might see kind of a trend towards secularism and a decrease in religiosity over time. Again, as we talked about last time, spirituality doesn't mean that's necessarily decreased when we go and do a survey on people's levels of spirituality. It's just that how we perceive our spirituality and the institution of religion is changing over time, as we can see in America, for example. So today we're going to be asking questions like how does the economics affect your life and does politics affect your life? And these are a lot of them are obvious answers, but some of them is a little bit more subtle. But again, think about it. Why are you in school right now? Why are you in college? And again, we're in sociology, so we're studying how larger social forces affect us. And again, the reason you're in college is one reason is you're in the United States. And in the United States, we live in a capitalist economy. And in a capitalist economy, what's the best way to get capital? And most people think the very best initial plan is to first get an education, which then gets you the job prestige, which then gets you wealth, which then improves your life chances and your overall social location in the hierarchically stratified class system that we live in. So again, why are you in college? Well, I mean, only 2 out of 100 of you can be farmers. The rest of you have to go get jobs. You live in a capitalist economy where we sell our labor, unless you're an owner. So again, the proletariat, we sell our labor to the owners, the bourgeoisie, for some capital. But who ends up getting the most capital out of the deal tends to be the owners. Hence, when you get into initial sociology and conflict theory and things, you're commonly studying the conflict between social classes, between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Or in modern times, you have that class system's a little bit more stratified, where you do have some semblance of a middle class, but the middle class tends to waver depending on the power of the owners versus the power of the workers, for example. So again, first and foremost, you guys live in a capitalist system, but not completely capitalist. And you live in a democratic system that's not completely democratic. What I mean by this is, yes, we do have um, a capitalist system that has some attributes of laissez-faire economics, but we also have social programs. And we have ways to bring up the lowest classes to balance out the equation a little bit. So it does have a touch of that socialist feel. And again, with our democratic government, yes, we do have individual rights and everybody gets to vote, but at the same time, we also give up a lot of our power and we give up our freedom to the state. So again, it's a little bit of a balance. America is more like a social democracy in a capitalist kind of, socialist economy also. So again, these are interesting ways to look at it. But the big questions are going to be, how do these institutions structure our life? What's the purpose of the institutions? That's functionalism. How are these institutions associated with conflict between groups of people competing for resources, conflict theory? And then how did these institutions originate? How did they come about? How did they get built? Symbolic interactionism. We're the ones who build the institutions by interacting with each other. Okay? So, the economy, again, is a social institution. It organizes, what's the purpose of it? It organizes the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services, the selling of goods and labor. Okay? The economy has evolved over time. Initially, we had, humans out in the wild. Then we have this agricultural revolution, and this is all very debatable because how old is human civilization is a whole nother question. But at some point in the last 10,000 years, we kind of went back to a dark ages. Whether that happened after the Great Ice Wall during 10,500 BC, wiped out all the coastal cities, is a whole different discussion for another class. But we'll just start around 10,000 BC, where humans had kind of gone back to a more of an agricultural way of life, an agrarian way of life. And again, the Great Sphinx is 26,000 years old. So just looking at some of that geology evidence, okay, there was a lot of civilization. Another day. So about 10,000 BC, though, something happened, whether it was because the Great Ice Wall broke and the world flooded, and you went from the Ice Age to the modern times, and here we are now. We ended up in this agricultural revolution, so farming, hunter-gathering, migrating, things along those lines. But then, as society got more and more complex and became more and more formalized and more organized, as society evolved or developed, we entered the Industrial Revolution, which is the initial division of labor when you get into the economics is based upon a surplus. So during the agricultural revolution, we started to get a surplus. So people started to specialize. The jobs started to get more specialized. And then technology got brought into this specialized society. And then all of a sudden, you create this class system where some people are owners and some people are workers as we start to leave the farms and urbanization increases and we all end up migrating toward the cities and the suburbs, which is what you see in modern times. Okay. So, this urbanization, this industrial revolution reduced agrarian life. So, people left their farms, they left their means of production to go into the city to sell their labor. Okay. And so again, so here becomes the stratified society of breaking people into social classes, into rich and poor, owners and bourgeoisie, workers and owners. So this was many hundreds of years in the making. And so now we live in a society that is highly stratified. The jobs are highly stratified. The jobs within the economy are highly stratified. They're highly specialized. Some get paid more than others. Okay, and so the amount of money you make then gets associated with your access to healthcare, the houses you get to buy, things along those lines. And this is all because we live in a capitalist system. Albeit the rich people pay taxes, hence the aspects of socialism, to the government, and then that money gets then distributed to other people through social programs and things along those lines. But we live in a capitalist system, and the goal of capitalism is to consolidate wealth into the hands of the few. The goal of capitalism is to remove competition. Okay? So again, when you ask questions like where did race come from? Guys, race came because the capitalist Europeans wanted to remove competition. So they set up a system that only Europeans could have the good jobs. They did it with women too. Sexism came about because men took a hierarchical position over women, subjugated them into the lower classes, didn't let them get a good education, didn't let them get a good job, didn't let them rise up the social class ladder. Okay? So again, economics is incredibly powerful. I mean, races were created so that one group could economically dominate another group. It's all about money. Why were women subjugated? Again, it's all about money and power. Okay? And now we're in a globalized world. And so you have countries versus countries. So you have people in the United States that make 10 times as much as the average person in China because America holds that elite position over on a global scale. And in America, historically, only white males could gain power. If you weren't white and you weren't male, you were stuck in the lower classes. You weren't given a chance to get power until the civil rights. Okay? So not only do we live in a capitalist system, but we also lived in a racist and a sexist system that denied access to anybody that wasn't non-white and wasn't male. Okay? All right. Again, so the economy affects us all. The economy, the job you get, where you're located is, very important to your overall life chances. But it is also associated again with your behavior. What are you doing in college? Well, because you live in a capitalist system where you need to get that education and get that job, you now have to behave in a way which is play the game and go to college. You could make the money without going to college, don't get me wrong. But on average, a college graduate makes twice as much as a high school graduate, and someone with a master's degree or a PhD makes twice as much as someone with a bachelor's. So again, education, life chances. So again, you guys live in a capitalist system. That's our economic system. However, there is some social aspects because we have social programs. In a capitalist system, the means of production are not owned by the government. That would be a communist system when the means of production are owned by the government. We live in a laissez-faire blended with a little bit of socialism because we do throw some crumbs and we have taxes. Okay. Capitalism is all about consolidating capital into the hands of the few to maximize profit and reduce competition to ensure no one else can compete. It's all about consolidating power. Okay. Socialism is another economic system which, again, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Okay? The means of production in the socialist system are collectively owned. Okay? So, again, in America, pretty much everything is privately owned, but there is some government funded programs, some government owned things. Okay? So, again, America is a blend. They call it welfare capitalism, is one thing you've heard. We have a capitalist system, we let it be, but we do throw some crumbs to the poor. Okay, why do you throw crumbs to the poor? And people always trash welfare, but again, rich people love welfare. They love welfare because if they throw some crumbs to the poor, then the lower class doesn't revolt. So again, by giving people like $1,200 a month, they don't care about that. That's nothing to rich people. Okay, they're totally fine to pay those taxes just to keep the lower class from revolting and redistributing the wealth. Okay, state capitalism is a little bit more like England, where the government owns a lot, but some of it's private, and every country is slightly different regarding their economy. Okay, again, in the modern times, you have the rise of unions, work laws. All of this come out of the strife between workers, again, and owners. I mean, back in the early 1900s, there's a reason we have child labor laws. There's a reason we have minimum wage. And this is, again, workers fighting for their rights against the owners who are the capitalists. Because the capitalists have all the power, and the lower class is subjected to the capitalists because they have to work for the capitalists by selling their labor to get themselves some capital so they can buy themselves some food, for example. Okay? But again, you see a lot of minority discrimination. It still continues to this day. A man who identifies as gay gets paid 20 cents less than a man who identifies as straight. A woman gets paid 20 cents less than a man. A black woman makes 20 cents less or 40 cents less than the average man, and so does a Latina. Okay, but in modern times, you have this technologically advanced society in the United States where blue collar jobs are pretty much gone. 80% of jobs now are white collar jobs, and the best way to get a white collar job is with an education. So, because you guys live in a capitalist economy where we sell off most of our blue collar factory jobs, most of the jobs in America are white collar jobs. Therefore, to compete for those jobs, you need an education. Therefore, the economy is driving you to get an education because that's the only way to really compete for some of those jobs. Okay, you do have the rise of corporations, and again, this is just coming along with the formalizing and the bureaucratizing of society and the institutions of society. Corporations are institutionalized with rules and procedures, just like governments are, and the education system is, and organizations. Okay, they're organized legally, they're bureaucratized. They tend to be conglomerates where they're doing multiple different companies are blended into one. They achieve the goal, of course, is monopoly, even though it's illegal, but to have as much control over the market share as they can. And again, once you get the rise of the corporations, they can weed out all those independent places. That's why when you go to like New York and things like that, there's it's all like a Starbucks and on every corner, and those little coffee shops are dying off slowly over time. Okay, so politics is all about the ability to sway power. So the goal of politics is to compete for power And the goal of politics is to maintain control of institutions that give you the power. And power is defined as your ability to impose one's will. Therefore, people engage in politics to be able to sway, to be able to gain influence, to get at that distribution of power, to be able to then impose their own will over society. Okay? And a government is an institution that is formalized and bureaucratized in which people engage in politics to sway the institution of government. So, again, politics and government are very separate. The government is the institution. The politics are the ones advocating for what to do with the institution or to create one or to change it, etc. Okay? So the book talks about types of power. There's authority, which is legitimate power, like the police. Okay? There's traditional power, like a shaman or the wise person in the village. Rational legal power, like your congressman or your senator, the bureaucratic power. Okay, charismatic power, like a leader who has, like Martin Luther King, has charismatic power. He doesn't have power over the laws, but he has power over charisma. And again, authority is legitimated power, not just the police, I meant to say, but also anyone that is socially recognized as having that authority. Because we can give that authority to our parents if we choose to, because they have legitimate power, of course, but at any time we can question it. So monarchy is having one ruler. Democracy is the people have power. Authoritarianism is political participation. Totalitarian is a concentrated political system that regulates lives extensively. Okay, so again, in the United States, politics is blended between capitalist and socialist. We're pushing for both laissez-faire, but we're also thinking about the people. So in America, you have states' rights versus federal rights. You have the individual versus the collective, and there's always that balance. Yes, in America, we weigh more on the side of individuals than countries like China that weigh more on the side of collectivism, but we still do care about the group as a whole, at least a little bit. Okay, but in America, you have these special interest groups, political parties competing for power, trying to gain sway over the government, the institution. Okay, in a pluralist society, the power is spread. In America, is it really pluralist or just some elite people kind of rule? Okay, good questions. Okay, the Marxist political economy model explains politics relations to economics. That again, most of political sway is all about getting access to that budget to get power, because again, money is power. The disengaged. Again, this is why I say that rich people love welfare, because if you don't give them some crumbs, they will overthrow you. I mean, go back thousands of years. Go back to Rome, the aristocracy was the one who was always getting thrown. Who killed, King Louis and Marie Antoinette? It was French women. They were hungry. So while Marie Antoinette was eating her cake in, Versailles, the French women were starving and so were their babies. So what did they do? They stormed the Bastille, they got the king and the queen, and then they cut their heads off. And then they, of course, had a couple more decades of revolution, and then Napoleon becoming emperor, and then overthrowing Napoleon, and then eventually they get a little bit more toward democracy. But even France and all that never got as close to democracy as the United States is. Okay? Terrorism is using violence as a political strategy, and war is organized conflict to sway politically and get power. Thank you so much. It is an honor.